You're not the biggest man in the room when you arrive. That matters. The biggest man in the room gets tested first, gets challenged earliest, burns the most energy in the first month, establishing something that needs to be reestablished every time a new body comes through the intake gate. Size is a liability dressed as an asset. What you are is something harder to read and therefore harder to target. Medium build, quiet face, eyes that move before your head does. You arrived at Corcoran State Prison at 23 with a 14-year sentence for aggravated assault and RICO conspiracy, and a stillness that the intake officer noted in his processing report as uncooperative without being able to point to a single thing you refused to do. You did everything they asked. You just did it in a way that made clear you were choosing to. The charge came out of a night in Stockton that started as a debt collection and became something else. When the man who owed the money decided he had other ideas, you were 22. The crew you were running with had been building for 3 years out of a neighborhood that the city had essentially stopped servicing. No jobs, no functional schools, no police presence except the reactive kind that shows up after the fact and processes the paperwork. The crew was the institution that filled the vacuum. You understood this before you could have articulated it. You were 16 when you started understanding it, and 22 when it sent you here, and 23 when you walked into Corcoran and saw the yard for the first time, and recognized it immediately as the same structure you'd been living inside since you were old enough to walk to school alone. The yard is the neighborhood. Different walls. Same geometry. You spend the first 3 months watching. This is the discipline that separates the men who rise from the men who arrive aggressive and spend their energy on the wrong targets. Everything in a contained environment is information. The way a man carries his tray, which table he approaches first, how he responds when someone tests him in the first week, whether the test produces fear or calculation being the response you're looking for in men you'll eventually need to rely on. You watch the shot caller on your block. He is a man named Marcus who has been inside for 17 years and carries the specific gravity of someone for whom the institution has become native terrain. You watch how he manages disputes without appearing to manage them, how the decisions flow down through 3 layers of intermediary and arrive at their destination as environmental facts rather than orders, how the authority is structural rather than personal, which means it persists when Marcus isn't physically present, which means it's real authority rather than the situational kind that collapses when the person exercising it leaves the room. You study him the way you studied nothing in school because school never offered anything worth studying this carefully. Marcus notices you noticing. This is its own test, a man who watches and is noticed watching and doesn't flinch from the notice. That's a data point. He sends someone to sit with you at lunch in month 4. The conversation is nothing on the surface. Sports, the food, how you're adjusting. Underneath the surface, it's a structured assessment and you know it and he knows you know it, and the knowing is itself part of what's being assessed. You answer what's being asked rather than what's being said. He hears this. The man relays it back. Month 7, Marcus moves you to a job in the kitchen. The kitchen is the center of the informal economy in a way that the outside world would find almost comic if the stakes weren't absolute. The kitchen controls food access, which is a power that everyone, from the most connected member to the most isolated non-factor, understands in their body because the body doesn't lie about food the way the mind can lie about other things. The kitchen also controls movement. A kitchen worker moves through the facility on a schedule that creates contact opportunities that other inmates don't have. Information, product, communication, the kitchen is infrastructure for all of it. You're there for 11 months. You learn every note of the operation, not because anyone teaches you comprehensively, because you pay attention and the pattern becomes legible when you pay attention long enough. At the end of 11 months, you know the kitchen operation better than 2 of the 3 men supposedly running it, and Marcus knows you know this, and the knowing is now a resource that belongs to both of you. You make your bones in year 3. The council had been sitting on a problem for 6 weeks, a man named Derek Cho. affiliated with a rival faction, had been doing business on territory that the arrangement didn't authorize him to do business on, and had been told twice, and the twice didn't take, and the council's options had narrowed to one option. You weren't on the council. You weren't yet in any formal position. What you were was someone who had spent 3 years building a specific kind of trust through a specific kind of reliability, and when Marcus came to you, it wasn't with a request. It was with a recognition. He said, I think you already know why I'm here. You said, give me 48 hours. He said, you have 36. You do it in the yard on a Wednesday during the window between shift changes when the camera on the east side of the weight area has its 7-minute rotation gap. The gap has been known for years. The administration knows that it's known and has been intending to fix it for 2 budget cycles. The budget cycle moves slower than the men who've memorized the rotation. Derek Cho survives with a punctured lung and 4 broken ribs, and the absolute operational understanding that the next time will be a different conversation. He serves the rest of his sentence in protective custody and never sets foot in the general population again. Marcus gives you your patch 6 weeks later. 3 months after that, Marcus goes to the SHU on an investigation hold, and you run G-Block for 9 weeks. And when Marcus comes back, the block is tighter than when he left. Not louder, not more enforced. Tighter, the accounts balanced, the disputes resolved, the new men assessed and positioned. Marcus sits with you that evening and says very little, and what he says is not a compliment exactly. It's a statement of fact. He says, you should have been running it before I left. You're the shot caller of G-Block before your 6th year is out. The transition doesn't come with the ceremony. Nothing in here comes with a ceremony. It comes with a conversation with 4 men in the yard that lasts 17 minutes and establishes who you are and what the structure's expectations of you are and what your expectations of the structure are. And then everyone walks away in different directions, and by dinner the block knows what happened without anyone having said it. The first decision you make that matters is about a man named Fitch. Fitch has been running the drug distribution on Tier 2 for 4 years. He is reliable, connected, generates significant revenue, and is skimming approximately 12% above his authorized cut. You know this because you spent 3 weeks auditing the tier accounts before you said anything to anyone about it. The 12% is not the problem. Men skim. The system accounts for some degree of skimming the way any financial system accounts for shrinkage. The problem is that Fitch has been skimming with enough confidence that he stopped being careful about it, which means he stopped believing the authority above him was watching carefully enough to catch it, which means he has assessed the authority as manageable, which is the same assessment that gets men killed in this environment. You call Fitch in on a Thursday. The conversation is 5 minutes. You lay out the number. Specific, documented, irrefutable. You watch his face move through the calculation in real time. Deny, negotiate, apologize, assess the consequence. You let him complete the calculation. Then you tell him what happens next. He pays back 60% of the total skim over the next 8 weeks through product contribution. He returns to his authorized cut going forward, and he understands that the conversation you just had is the only conversation on this topic that will ever happen. He nods. You say, I need to hear you say you understand. He says he understands. Fitch becomes one of your most reliable tier lieutenants for the next 4 years, not because of the threat, because the conversation established something true about how your authority works. It watches, it documents, it gives one opportunity for correction, and it is completely without ambiguity about what follows if the correction isn't taken. Men can operate inside clarity. It's the ambiguity that produces the bad behavior. The organization you're running is not simple. The outside world thinks prison gangs are blunt instruments. Violence and drugs and territory, marked in blood. The reality is a management problem of considerable complexity. You have 61 men under your direct authority. They have different temperaments, different affiliations, different levels of reliability, different debts and obligations and vulnerabilities that can be exploited by the administration if you don't manage them before the administration does. You have financial operations that run through 3 different product streams and require accounting, supply chain management, distribution coordination, and enforcement. You have external relationships with the council above you, with affiliated gangs running other blocks, with the modified working relationship with certain custody staff that keeps the block stable. You have internal relationships that require constant maintenance because contained environments